Go to the Buncombe County GIS system. Type in 235 Mills Gap Road, and that aqua outline right there, which is ironic in and of itself, there is the 9 acres that are encompassed in that fence. Keep in mind the whole site was over 50 acres and it included this area behind the plant outside of that fence that was developed, it would appear to be illegally under fraudulent pretenses. Come over to the right of the plant and you're looking at Terry Rice's house. In the bottom portion, that's Dot and Larry Sr.'s house, and there's Larry Jr.'s house. This is 273 and 277 and 275 Mills Gap Road. And they thought they could just create paperwork and hide a major mistake in 1995 of letting them off the surplus inventory. I told you that they had a fire that the local fire department had to respond to, and they didn't really have the equipment to be dealing with a hazardous waste fire which was left in the wake of this plant. I want you to know that there used to be a road right here, and you can clearly see it. And it came up around the plant site, which some of the employees told us they used to see trucks going up here all the time with forklifts on the back. We believe that there may be some burying going on up here. Now the EPA said they've never found buried containers. They said they never found any buried barrels. The EPA said there's no tanks underneath, but then again, EPA never used any ground penetrating radar to make that claim. They just used magnetometers and electromagnetometers. What are those going to show up? What's going to show up there if you're using polyethylene barrels? Here's the area that Dave Ogren was concerned about in 1987. Look at the proximity to the Rice family. This is down gradient. This is about 300 feet from that door to that end of the building. Look at all this stuff out front. This is in 1998, this aerial. Look at this behind the plant where they used to drive up, which is where the dog lot was, where the hazardous waste storage area was. Look what they've done in this area here with the earth moved. Again, have a closer look. Shocking when you look at the aerials. And it makes sense that in March of 2002, when Barbara Caprita was dealing with Dr. James Webster and the other on-scene coordinators and the other site assessment managers, and they were talking about the next step, which was getting ready to unleash what's called an action memorandum for enforcement, that she said she was sending CTS Corporation old aerial photographs. I wonder if that was to identify some of these features that we're looking at now. But what they tried to do was to cover this plant site and the fact that it was prematurely given the green light, put on a path towards brownfield development. At the expense, they sacrificed the Rice family. They sacrificed these families that lived on this property and the Robinsons, the people that have gotten sick, the people that have died. Again, you look at this area in here. I wonder if this is part of the aerials that were sent to CTS. Over here on the left-hand side, this is where the 500,000 gallon reservoir was built on behalf of the company by the county and the city. On the other side, there's a turnaround. We've always kept our eye on that turnaround. I believe that some of the people in Southside Village that have noticed oozing coming out of this area may be because of spraying and dumping. I'm a little bit concerned to the right of this image when we look at these areas in here, which was part of that road structure. Left. Again, 2002, EPA comes out in this map from Tetra Tech. They referenced SDO2. Now, obviously, this isn't to scale. Now, the EPA said that they had never found any buried barrels. Well, that's interesting because EPA Region IV found buried barrels in the southwest corner along the fence line. Buried green drums. Buried green drums. There's no write-up about it. They found Methylnaphthalene at 17,000 parts per billion, 23,000 parts per billion. They found TCE at 33,000 parts per billion. And they're calling this the Mills Gap site instead of the CTS site. And they forgot about their history. And as a history teacher, shame on you.
This is the cover sheet from the 1999 Tetra Tech report for EPA. Notice it says Mills Gap site. Trip report, Mills Gap site. Now this was under the CTS of Asheville site, and it's being prepared for EPA Region IV Emergency Response and Removal Branch. The task manager was Barbara Caprita. Here it says analytical results for Mills Gap site, yet on this page it shows that the site facility is CTS of Asheville, and that's the CTS of Asheville Superfund site, and the project manager is Don Rigger. Don Rigger is project leader. I wonder if he's the one that realized what they had done by letting that site, the CTS site of Asheville, off of their surplus inventory. Don Rigger was asked in January 2010 if he was the one that changed the size of the site from 57 acres to 9 acres. Wonder if that was to conceal what had happened at CA-SDO2.
CA-SDO2 was from 1990. Right there. When they said they didn't find any barrels, that's interesting because in that report it says southwest fence line of sight. Note buried green drums. Oops. As a holder of a master's in fine art photography, I know the value of a good picture. I also know the value of not using the toner properly so that you can't see the picture. But at least they had the good sense to write it out for us. Called it the Mills Gap site. It's on CTS's property. Every single action was done to conceal the fact that it was CTS of Asheville site. Now we know, now we understand, now we can demonstrate the validity of our intuition. In 2001, EPA came out. EPA came out and screened the site. They realized that there was 830,000 parts per billion of TCE in the soil. This is the extent of the ground of the soil contamination, the soil plume. They wrote an action memorandum for enforcement. They said that 57 acres were an imminent threat because of the contaminants migrating downward through vertical percolation, that if it got to the groundwater it would be tragic, terrible. Here's the memorandum. Lois Gibbs from Love Canal looked at these documents. She said she had never seen a more specific and well-written action memorandum for enforcement. It said what the problem was in terms of contaminants, what the actions needed to be in terms of soil excavation and treatment, and what would happen if nothing was done. And there is Don Rigger's signature. James Webster, Doug Lair, Emergency Response, and Richard Green, Director of Waste Management. They're the ones that cleared the property in 1995. And within 6 days, Don Rigger takes a pen and starts carving it up, in my opinion. Changes the site from 57 acres to 9 acres, even though you would think that with all these guys writing this document, that when they wrote 57 acres, on the front page of the action memorandum for enforcement, that they would have gotten it right. They didn't change that, but they changed it in 6 days' time. That action memorandum went out on April 4th, 2002. Within 6 days it's changed.